Hi, welcome. Today I would like to see how you can get started with react.js. And so let's get started. Basically, you can look at the instructions on the react.js website. And what you want to do is for a new app, basically install this npm package and you'll get create react app, which I've already done. And once you have that, you can essentially create a new app. And I'm going to create a new app and I will call it React app. And while this is going on, basically it should create a complete new folder with an app. And what you can do is you can also install React developer tools if you are using Chrome, so you can see the various components of React, and this is a pretty useful extension. So I've already done that. Let's see what is the progress of our things. Okay, so that is going on. As you might know, the main one of the main things about React is that it uses the concept of virtual DOM, and it manipulates essentially the virtual DOM, and only the elements that get changed are written to the actual DOM, and it does through properties and states. So the advantage with that is that uh, the rendering functionality is essentially specified in components, and what you do is you specify how exactly the component is rendered, and then you don't really have to worry about what exact portions of the DOM need to be changed, and the React will take care of that for you. So it looks like the app got built, and to start the app you can then just use npm start. First I'm going to go into that directory it created for me called the React app, and I can type in npm start. It should basically create the app on localhost 3000, and it should be rendering in a second. Okay, so that's basically the starter app that gets rendered. And as I talked to you about the extension for React developer tools, you can look at that, and you can also look at various components. So as you can see, we have an app component, and that's the only component we have in here. So let's just take a quick look at the code that got created by the starter app. And as you can see, most of the code is under source, so you can go in there. The index.js is where it starts everything. Here is where it starts basically showing your component. So here we have a component called app. So react dot render. You give it the element, and where it gets rendered in the root. And where you can see where the root is, it's basically being done by the starter app, and it creates an element called id equal to root. So you can see where that got created. So if I go back to my index.js, you can see it is rendering the app component, and in the app component, we have this is the app component, and the syntax for that is fairly straightforward. You have an app which is extending a component, and we are specifying something called the render function, and the render function is doing all these things. And if you want to quickly take a look, it's pretty easy. You can see this was the app header. This is an SVG file that is being shown. And here is where it says you can get started. You can update this and change it. So it's pretty straightforward. Let's say if I wanted to change this, I can go ahead and add something in here. Let's see. And that should basically change the text. And you can see the text got changed. So essentially we are working in this component and it's rendering the whole thing. If you look at it, this is basically a JSX syntax, but it looks pretty much like HTML for the most part. So you can see it's essentially a div, and then we had a paragraph name. So for example, if you wanted to create a quick component, The easiest way would be to just make a test component, and I'm just going to make a test component at the root just for demonstrations. So I'm just going to call it a new file, and I will just call it test.js, and this is going to be our test component. And to make that, I can just copy my original component into the test component, so we won't have to worry too much about the syntax here. So I'm going to change the name of the component to test here, and we are going to export test. And let's say in this component we are only worried about just this portion of a subcomponent. So what we can do is instead of just hard coding this, it's going to accept properties. So let's say we put in a property called name, and that's all it's going to render in here. So what we want to do in our original app component is obviously we have to import this new component. So we can say import test from slash dot, and we call it test.js. The component was called test and the file test.js, so we're going to import it. So obviously we need to just use the test component here, and we're going to use the test component, and since we wanted a property name, we can add the name and we can specify it as a parameter here basically. So essentially what it is doing is we need to add this component syntax. So we created a test component and we are specifying, giving it a parameter with an attribute name, and we gave it a value GOR. And if you look in my component, all it is doing is whatever it gets in the property, it is displaying it under a paragraph. So that should work. So let's give it a quick try. And you can see it's still showing GOR, which is what it expected to show. Just to make sure that it is getting the right property, let's just change the name here to GOR Associates for a second. And if we go back, so that's basically how you can have a component, and you essentially combine various components in React to build various apps. So this is a very basic demo, and thank you for watching this short screencast, and I will add that to my website, GOR Associates, under react.js. Thank you, and you have a great day.